Hi, Christian Roman here again with a few more questions that didn't get answered after my last live stream with Experiential. So the first question comes from Shailene. They ask, what tricks do you use to help the audience understand what the character needs without the character being self-aware necessarily? This is a good question. For me, you want the audience to learn with the character. You don't want the audience to be ahead of the main character or they'll get frustrated. If the main audience knows what the character needs before the character knows what they need, then they're going to be asking like, well, why doesn't, like from Carl in Up, why doesn't Carl just get rid of the house? Because that's what he eventually learns that he needs to do, is let go of the house. So you don't really want to tell the audience what the character needs until the character learns what they need. Otherwise, the audience is just going to be sitting around waiting for the character to figure it out. And it's better if neither the character nor the audience really knows until that point in the story. You want the audience and the character to know what they want, but not necessarily what they need. And you want the character to, when they learn what they need, they should be a little self-aware and act on that. Or if they don't act on what they need, then it's a story about failure. It's about them not achieving something. So you could, if they're not self-aware enough to know what they need, then it's a story about not getting it. And maybe that's what you want to tell too. You want an example of what happens if you don't figure out what you need. And then you can use other characters to point out what they need. Say you have a story about like a dad that wants to buy their son a really cool but expensive bike. And so they take on a second job to make money to buy that bike. And the son says, well, Dad, I just want to, why are you working so much? You just want to spend time with you. And the dad's like, no. I want, after your birthday, we're going to spend all this time. So you start to realize, even though the dad wants to buy their son a bike, what they need to do is spend more time with the son. And the son is kind of pointing that out. So you can use other characters to point out what they need and let the audience figure that out 2 + 2. It's not like the son is saying, Dad, you need to stop working and spend more time with me. So finding subtle ways to let the audience make that information, but don't let the audience get ahead of your main character. Otherwise, they're going to just be sitting around and wondering why the character is so dumb and they can't figure this out. So that's that question. The second question, the next question comes from Stefan, and they ask, after determining the story spine, can you change it from linear to nonlinear? If so, what is important to consider when telling the story non-linearly with things like flashbacks and flash forwards? A lot of movies try to do this, and they do. Many movies do a good job of it, some don't. But the thing to keep in mind is that even if you take the story and move it to non-linear, the audience is still watching it in a linear way. So you still want to have the elements of platform challenge resolution in the story, even if you're flipping the timeline around. You can show like something happening in the far future in the beginning, and then flashback in the middle, and then the ending has the middle part. But it should still have that kind of progression story-wise. So for example, even if you start the story in the beginning, start telling the story with a flash forward, you still need to establish who the characters are, where they are, what they do all the time, just so the audience understands who the story is about. And then you can jump back and forth and start to parse out information. That's another thing to consider, is that you are delivering information to the audience and you want to have them keep asking questions about where your story is going. If you parse out information too much, like if you have a flash forward that shows, oh, they won the race, why is that important to tell the audience? Is that going to take away their excitement about whether or not the characters are going to win? Or maybe you like set up something where like they won, but it's impossible. How did they win? So you're now setting up that the story you're going to tell is how they figured out to overcome the impossible to win. So just keep in mind that you are parsing that information out, so you want to reorganize it. A great movie to look at is Memento by Christopher Nolan, where they tell the whole movie backwards, but the way the information is parsed out is very linear, and you learn along kind of with the main character. You're learning what the order of things is, and you're learning about his past in a way that's very linear, even though the storytelling seems nonlinear. Also, another example to consider, Finding Nemo. When Andrew Stanton was first making that movie, he wanted to parse out the opening, the part where you learn that Nemo was the last egg of a whole group of eggs, the only one to survive. He didn't want the audience to know that. He was parsing that out over the length of the story originally, and it wasn't working because nobody liked Marlin, the dad. They thought, why is he being so overprotective, and why is he being a jerk? And you didn't understand that until the very end of the movie in the first version, where you finally see that, he's that overprotective because Nemo is the last of all his brothers and sisters. And he realized that that was robbing the audience of context. And so instead of separating that out into flashbacks, he just put it all in the beginning, and it made the movie so much better. So be very careful about how you use flashbacks, because sometimes you might be thinking you're being clever and telling a story in a unique way, but it may end up backfiring on you if the audience doesn't go along with you on that journey. So those are my answers to those questions, and hopefully that helps you out in your storytelling journey. Good luck.